Money. It's a topic that dominates our thoughts, conversations, and even our dreams. But have you ever stopped to wonder why two people with similar information can take completely different financial decisions? It's not in the numbers, but in the complex psychology of how we regard and manage our money. In his book, The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel explores how our personal experiences, emotions, and mindsets shape our financial behaviors. Let's get to some of the insights that you will probably change the way one thinks about wealth and success. First, Housel reminds us that no one's crazy. Each of us has a unique financial perspective shaped by our upbringing, personal experiences, and the socioeconomic environment we grew up in. What seems illogical to one appears logical to the other. Hence, these differences are to be taken care of and respected. Dogs were domesticated 10,000 years ago and still retain some behaviors of their wild ancestors. Yet here we are, with between 20 and 50 years of experience in the modern financial system, hoping to be perfectly acclimated. For a topic that is so influenced by emotion versus fact, this is a problem. And it helps explain why we don't always do what we're supposed to with money. We all do crazy stuff with money because we're all relatively new to this game, and what looks crazy to you might make sense to me. But no one is crazy. We all make decisions based on our own unique experiences that seem to make sense to us in a given moment. Next, let's talk about luck and risk. Doing well in finance involves a lot more than just smart decision-making. It also depends on the timing of what you were born, where you were born, and other things that are often completely outside your control. Realizing the presence of luck and risk makes us humble and honest about our financial success. After spending years around investors and business leaders, I've come to realize that someone else's failure is usually attributed to bad decisions, while your own failures are usually chalked up to the dark side of risk. When judging your failures, I'm likely to prefer a clean and simple story of cause and effect, because I don't know what's going on inside your head. You had a bad outcome, so it must have been caused by a bad decision, is the story that makes the most sense to me. But when judging myself, I can make up a wild narrative justifying my past decisions and attributing bad outcomes to risk. The cover of Forbes magazine does not celebrate poor investors who made good decisions but happened to experience the unfortunate side of risk. But it almost certainly celebrates rich investors who made okay or even reckless decisions and happened to get lucky. Both flip the same coin that happened to land on a different side. The dangerous part of this is that we're all trying to learn about what works and what doesn't with money. What investing strategies work? Which ones don't? What business strategies work? Which ones don't? How do you get rich? How do you avoid being poor? We tend to seek out these lessons by observing successes and failures and saying, do what she did, avoid what he did. If we had a magic wand, we would find out exactly what proportion of these outcomes were caused by actions that are repeatable versus the role of random risk and luck that swayed those actions one way or the other. But we don't have a magic wand. We have brains that prefer easy answers without much appetite for nuance. So identifying the traits we should emulate or avoid can be agonizingly hard. Bill Gates once said, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. When things are going extremely well, realize it's not as good as you think. You are not invincible, and if you acknowledge that luck brought you success, then you have to believe in luck's cousin, risk, which can turn your story around just as quickly." But the same is true in the other direction. Failure can be a lousy teacher because it seduces smart people into thinking their decisions were terrible when sometimes they just reflect the unforgiving realities of risk. The trick when dealing with failure is arranging your financial life in a way that a bad investment here and a missed financial goal there won't wipe you out, so you can keep playing until the odds fall in your favor. But more important is that as much as we recognize the role of luck in success, the role of risk means we should forgive ourselves and leave room for understanding when judging failures. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Let's talk about the never enough feeling of money. There is no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. It's one of the most important. If expectations rise with results, there is no logic in striving for more, because you'll feel the same after putting in extra effort. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more money, more power, more prestige, increases ambition faster than satisfaction. In that case, one step forward pushes the goalpost 2 steps ahead. You feel as if you're falling behind, and the only way to catch up is to take greater and greater amounts of risk. Modern capitalism is a pro at 2 things: generating wealth and generating envy. Perhaps they go hand in hand. Wanting to surpass your peers can be the fuel of hard work. But life isn't any fun without a sense of enough. Happiness, as it's said, is just results minus expectations. The idea of having enough might look like conservatism, leaving opportunity and potential on the table. I don't think that's right. Enough is realizing that the opposite, an insatiable appetite for more, will push you to the point of regret. There are many things never worth risking, no matter the potential gain. Reputation is invaluable. Freedom and independence are invaluable. Family and friends are invaluable. Being loved by those who you want to love you is invaluable. Happiness is invaluable, and your best shot at keeping these things is knowing when it's time to stop taking risks that might harm them, knowing when you have enough. The good news is that the most powerful tool for building enough is remarkably simple and doesn't require taking risks that could damage any of these things. One of the most powerful forces in finance is compounding. To demonstrate, this has been used by Warren Buffett with his wealth. It's not about getting high returns quickly, it's about patience and consistency. At the age of only 20 years in 1950, Warren Buffett's net worth was a mere $9,800, or some $120,000 when adjusted for today's inflation. Small fortune, perhaps, but for Buffett, the journey was about to start. Fast forward to 1975. Now 45, Buffett was worth roughly $10 million, having spent the last 25 years investing cautiously, letting his money compound and build his wealth. By the year 2000, Warren Buffett, at the age of 70, had accumulated a fortune of $30 billion. Those very principles of compounding and consistency that had helped him grow from thousands to millions were now working on a much larger scale, transforming millions into billions. Fast forward to 2024, where Warren Buffett is now 95 years old and sitting right on top of the list of the richest people with something around $125 billion. The secret lies in the power of compounding over time and unwavering consistency in his investment approach. Now, compounding is much like a tree that starts from a little seed. First, growth is almost inconceivably slow, hardly noticeable. Then, with the passage of time, the tree grows up, and while growing, its root gets deeper down into the ground and its arms widen. The longer it is allowed to grow, the larger it becomes. Building wealth and maintaining it require different skills. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy highlights this contrast. As bold decisions may let you gain wealth, staying wealthy requires caution, humility, and a long-term perspective. There are a million ways to get wealthy, and plenty of books on how to do so. But there's only one way to stay wealthy: some combination of frugality and paranoia. Compounding doesn't rely on earning big returns. Merely good returns sustained uninterrupted for the longest period of time, especially in times of chaos and havoc, will always win. A plan is only useful if it can survive reality, and a future filled with unknowns is everyone's reality. Another important idea is tails you win. In finance, relatively few events usually explain a great fraction of results. The events may be rare, but they can be beneficial to achieve good financial success. At the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting in 2013, Warren Buffett said he's owned 400 to 500 stocks during his life and made most of his money on 10 of them. Charlie Munger followed up. If you remove just a few of Berkshire's top investments, its long-term track record is pretty average. When we pay special attention to a role model's successes, we overlook that their gains came from a small percent of their actions. That makes our own failures, losses, and setbacks feel like we're doing something wrong. But it's possible we are wrong, or just sort of right, just as often as the masters are. They may have been more right when they were right, but they could have been wrong just as often as you. It's not whether you're right or wrong that's important, George Soros once said, but how much money you make when you're right and how much you lose when you're wrong. You can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune. So you can be wrong half time, but still you can make a fortune if you tail to wins. One of the most precious qualities of money is the freedom it creates. Housel highlights that true wealth is not living in abundance, but having the ability to run one's time and living life on one's terms. The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. People want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness is a complicated subject because everyone's different. But if there's a common denominator in happiness, a universal fuel of joy, it's that people want to control their lives. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Gerontologist Carl Pillemer interviewed 1,000 elderly Americans looking for the most important lessons they learned from decades of life experience. He wrote, "No one, not a single person out of 1,000, said that to be happy, you should try to work as hard as you can to make money to buy the things you want. No one, not a single person, said it's important to be at least as wealthy as the people around you, and if you have more than they do, it's real success. No one, not a single person, said you should choose your work based on your desired future earning power. What they did value were things like quality friendships, being part of something bigger than themselves, and spending quality, unstructured time with their children. Your kids don't want your money, or what your money buys, anywhere near as much as they want you. Specifically, they want you with them. Take it from those who have lived through everything. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. Now, a short chapter on one of the lowest dividends money pays. Man in the car paradox. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. The best part of being a valet is getting to drive some of the coolest cars to ever touch pavement. Guests came in driving Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls-Royces, the whole aristocratic fleet. It was my dream to have one of these cars of my own because I thought they sent such a strong signal to others that you made it. You're smart, you're rich, you have taste, you're important. Look at me. The irony is that I rarely, if ever, looked at them, the drivers. When you see someone driving a nice car, you rarely think, wow, the guy driving that car is cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. Subconscious or not, this is how people think. There is a paradox here. People tend to want wealth to signal to others that they should be liked and admired. But in reality, those other people often bypass admiring you, not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. My point here is not to abandon the pursuit of wealth, or even fancy cars. I like both. It's a subtle recognition that people generally aspire to be respected and admired by others, and using money to buy fancy things may bring less of it than you imagine. If respect and admiration are your goal, be careful how you seek it. Humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. We're not done talking about Ferraris. Another story about the paradox of fast cars in the next chapter. Wealth is not what you see. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. We should be careful to define the difference between wealthy and rich. It is more than semantics. Not knowing the difference is a source of countless poor money decisions. Rich is a current income. Someone driving a $100,000 car is almost certainly rich, because even if they purchased the car with debt, you need a certain level of income to afford the monthly payment. Same with those who live in big homes. It's not hard to spot rich people. They often go out of their way to make themselves known. There are, of course, wealthy people who also spend a lot of money on stuff. But even in those cases, what we see is their richness, not their wealth. We see the cars they chose to buy and perhaps the school they choose to send their kids to. We don't see the savings, retirement accounts, or investment portfolios. We see the homes they bought, not the homes they could have bought had they stretched themselves thin. The danger here is that I think most people deep down want to be wealthy. They want freedom and flexibility, which is what financial assets not yet spent can give you. But it is so ingrained in us that to have money is to spend money that we don't get to see the restraint it takes to actually be wealthy. And since we can't see it, it's hard to learn about it. The world is filled with people who look modest but are actually wealthy, and people who look rich, who live at the razor's edge of insolvency. Keep this in mind when quickly judging others' success and setting your own goals. If wealth is what you don't spend, what good is it? Well, let me convince you to save money. The first idea, simple but easy to overlook, is that building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns and lots to do with your savings rate. Investment returns can make you rich. But whether an investing strategy will work and how long it will work for, and whether markets will cooperate, is always in doubt. Results are shrouded in uncertainty. Personal savings and frugality, finances conservation and efficiency are parts of the money equation that are more in your control and have a 100% chance of being as effective in the future as they are today. Wealth is just the accumulated leftovers after you spend what you take in. And since you can build wealth without a high income, but have no chance of building wealth without a high savings rate, it's clear which one matters more. In a world where intelligence is hyper-competitive and many previous technical skills have become automated, competitive advantages tilt toward nuanced and soft skills like communication, empathy, and perhaps most of all, flexibility. The ability to do those things when most others can't is one of the few things that will set you apart in a world where intelligence is no longer a sustainable advantage. Having more control over your time and options is becoming one of the most valuable currencies in the world. That's why more people can, and more people should, save money. You know what else they should do? Stop trying to be so rational. Let me tell you why. Aiming to be reasonable, rational works better than trying to be coldly rational. You're not a spreadsheet. You're a person. A screwed-up, emotional person. It took me a while to figure this out, but once it clicked, I realized it's one of the most important parts of finance. With it comes something that often goes overlooked. Do not aim to be coldly rational when making financial decisions. Aim to just be pretty reasonable. Reasonable is more realistic, and you have a better chance of sticking with it for the long run, which is what matters most when managing money. Next, we'll talk about surprise. History is mostly the study of surprising events, but it is often used by investors and economists as an unassailable guide to the future. Two dangerous things happen when you rely too heavily on investment history as a guide to what's going to happen next. 1. You'll likely miss the outlier events that move the needle the most. 2. History can be a misleading guide to the future of the economy and stock market because it doesn't account for structural changes that are relevant to today's world. That doesn't mean we should ignore history when thinking about money. But there's an important nuance. The further back in history you look, the more general your takeaways should be. General things like people's relationship to greed and fear, how they behave under stress, and how they respond to incentives tend to be stable in time. The history of money is useful for that kind of stuff. But specific trends, specific trades, specific sectors, specific causal relationships about markets, and what people should do with their money are always an example of evolution in progress. Historians are not prophets. The question, then, is how should we think about and plan for the future? Let's take a look in the next chapter. The most important part of every plan is planning for things that may not go according to plan. This is called room for error. The wisdom in having room for error is acknowledging that uncertainty, randomness, and chance, unknowns, are an ever-present part of life. The only way to deal with them is by increasing the gap between what you think will happen and what can happen, while still leaving you capable of fighting another day. Bill Gates understood this well. When Microsoft was a young company, he said he came up with this incredibly conservative approach that I wanted to have enough money in the bank to pay a year's worth of payroll, even if we didn't get any payments coming in. There are a few specific places for investors to think about room for error. One is volatility. Can you survive your assets declining by 30%? On a spreadsheet, maybe yes, in terms of actually paying your bills and staying cash flow positive. But what about mentally? It is easy to underestimate what a 30% decline does to your psyche. Your confidence may become shot at the very moment opportunity is at its highest. You, or your spouse, may decide it's time for a new plan or new career. I know several investors who quit after losses because they were exhausted, physically exhausted. Spreadsheets are good at telling you when the numbers do or don't add up. They're not good at modeling how you'll feel when you tuck your kids in at night, wondering if the investment decisions you've made were a mistake that will hurt their future. Having a gap between what you can technically endure versus what's emotionally possible is an overlooked version of room for error. The trick that often goes overlooked, even by the wealthiest, is what we saw in Chapter 10, realizing that you don't need a specific reason to save. It's fine to save for a car, or a home, or for retirement, but it's equally important to save for things you can't possibly predict or even comprehend, the financial equivalent of field mice. Now, let me show you how this applies to you. Long-term planning is harder than it seems because people's goals and desires change all the time. So, you will change too. Every 5-year-old boy wants to drive a tractor when they grow up. Few jobs look better in the eyes of a young boy whose idea of a good job begins and ends with vroom vroom, beep beep, big tractor, here I come. Then many grow up and realize that driving a tractor maybe isn't the best career. Maybe they want something more prestigious or lucrative, so as a teenager they dream of being a lawyer. Now they think, they know, their plan is set. Law school and its costs, here we come. Then, as a lawyer, they face such long working hours that they rarely see their families. So perhaps they take a lower-paying job with flexible hours. Then they realize that childcare is so expensive that it consumes most of their paycheck, and they opt to be a stay-at-home parent. This, they conclude, is finally the right choice. Then, at age 70, they realize that a lifetime of staying home means they're unprepared to afford retirement. Long-term financial planning is essential, but things change, both the world around you and your own goals and desires. It is one thing to say, we don't know what the future holds. It's another to admit that you, yourself, don't know today what you will even want in the future. And the truth is, few of us do. It's hard to make enduring long-term decisions when your view of what you'll want in the future is likely to shift. We should also come to accept the reality of changing our minds. Some of the most miserable workers I've met are people who stay loyal to a career only because it's the field they picked when deciding on a college major at age 18. When you accept the end of history illusion, you realize that the odds of picking a job when you're not old enough to drink, that you will still enjoy when you're old enough to qualify for Social Security, are low. The quicker it's done, the sooner you can get back to compounding. Next, let's talk about nothing is free. Everything has a price, and the key to a lot of things with money is just figuring out what that price is and being willing to pay it. The problem is that the price of a lot of things is not obvious until you've experienced them firsthand when the bill is overdue. Every job looks easy when you're not the one doing it, because the challenges faced by someone in the arena are often invisible to those in the crowd. Most things are harder in practice than they are in theory. Sometimes this is because we're overconfident. More often, it's because we're not good at identifying what the price of success is, which prevents us from being able to pay it. Few investors have the disposition to say, I'm actually fine if I lose 20% of my money. This is doubly true for new investors who have never experienced a 20% decline. But if you view volatility as a fee, things look different. Disneyland tickets cost $100, but you get an awesome day with your kids you'll never forget. Last year, more than 18 million people thought that fee was worth paying. Few felt the $100 was a punishment or a fine. The worthwhile trade-off of fees is obvious when it's clear you're paying one. Same with investing, where volatility is almost always a fee, not a fine. Market returns are never free and never will be. They demand you pay a price, like any other product. You're not forced to pay this fee, just like you're not forced to go to Disneyland. You can go to the local county fair where tickets might be $10 or stay home for free. You might still have a good time, but you'll usually get what you pay for. Same with markets. The volatility uncertainty fee, the price of returns, is the cost of admission to get returns greater than low-fee parks like cash and bonds. The trick is convincing yourself that the market's fee is worth it. That's the only way to properly deal with volatility and uncertainty, not just putting up with it, but realizing that it's an admission fee worth paying. There's no guarantee that it will be. Sometimes it rains at Disneyland. But if you view the admission fee as a fine, you'll never enjoy the magic. Find the price, then pay it. Beware of taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you are. So it's time to talk about you and me. What do you expect people to do when momentum creates a big short-term return potential? Sit and watch patiently? Never. That's not how the world works. Profits will always be chased. And short-term traders operate in an area where the rules governing long-term investing, particularly around valuation, are ignored because they're irrelevant to the game being played. That's where things get interesting and where the problems begin. Bubbles do their damage when long-term investors playing one game start taking their cues from those short-term traders playing another. Next, let's talk about pessimism. Seduction of pessimism is one more big idea. Pessimism often sounds more intelligent than optimism, especially in finance. But a balanced view that acknowledges both risks and opportunities is essential for long-term success. Stocks rising 1% might be briefly mentioned in the evening news, but a 1% fall will be reported in bold all-caps letters, usually written in blood red. The asymmetry is hard to avoid. And while few question or try to explain why the market went up, isn't it supposed to go up? There is almost always an attempt to explain why it went down. Are investors worried about economic growth? Did the Fed screw things up again? Are politicians making bad decisions? Is there another shoe to drop? Narratives about why a decline occurred make them easier to talk about, worry about, and frame a story around what you think will happen next. Usually, more of the same. Even if you don't own stocks, those kind of things will grab your attention. In 2004, the New York Times interviewed Stephen Hawking, the scientist whose incurable motor neuron disease left him paralyzed and unable to talk at age 21. Through his computer, Hawking told the interviewer how excited he was to sell books to lay people. "Are you always this cheerful?" the Times asked. "My expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus," he replied. Expecting things to be great means a best-case scenario that feels flat. Pessimism reduces expectations, narrowing the gap between possible outcomes and outcomes you feel great about. Maybe that's why it's so seductive. Expecting things to be bad is the best way to be pleasantly surprised when they're not, which, ironically, is something to be optimistic about. Now, a short story about stories. Appealing fiction, and why stories are more powerful than statistics. The more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimates the odds of it being true. This is a big part of why room for error, flexibility, and financial independence, important themes discussed in previous chapters, are indispensable. The bigger the gap between what you want to be true and what you need to be true to have an acceptable outcome, the more you are protecting yourself from falling victim to an appealing financial fiction. The biggest risk is that you want something to be true so badly that the range of your forecast isn't even in the same ballpark as reality. The one who's confident he knows what's happening based on what he sees, but turns out to be completely wrong because he can't know the stories going on inside everyone else's head. He's all of us. Congratulations, you're still watching. It's time to tie together a few things we've learned. This chapter is a bit of a summary. Go out of your way to find humility when things are going right and forgiveness when they go wrong, because it's never as good or as bad as it looks. The world is big and complex. Luck and risk are both real and hard to identify. Do so when judging both yourself and others. Respect the power of luck and risk, and you'll have a better chance of focusing on things you can actually control. You'll also have a better chance of finding the right role models. Less ego, more wealth. Saving money is the gap between your ego and your income, and wealth is what you don't see. So wealth is created by suppressing what you could buy today in order to have more stuff or more options in the future. No matter how much you earn, you will never build wealth unless you can put a lid on how much fun you can have with your money right now, today. Manage your money in a way that helps you sleep at night. That's different from saying you should aim to earn the highest returns or save a specific percentage of your income. Some people won't sleep well unless they're earning the highest returns. Others will only get a good rest if they're conservatively invested. To each their own. But the foundation of, does this help me sleep at night, is the best universal guidepost for all financial decisions. You should like risk because it pays off over time. But you should be paranoid of ruinous risk because it prevents you from taking future risks that will pay off over time. Define the game you're playing and make sure your actions are not being influenced by people playing a different game. Respect the mess. Smart, informed, and reasonable people can disagree in finance because people have vastly different goals and desires. There is no single right answer, just the answer that works for you. No matter how we save or invest, I'm sure we'll always have the goal of independence and we'll always do whatever maximizes for sleeping well at night. We think it's the ultimate goal, the mastery of the psychology of money. But, to each their own. No one is crazy. And that wraps up today's deep dive into the psychology of money. I hope you found these insights valuable and helpful for your own financial journey. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let me know how the psychology of money has impacted your decisions. And if you have any suggestions for future topics, feel free to share them with me.